Welcome to our newest episode of The Spin, where I'm joined by Oakland-born and soon-to-be NYC-based rapper kJADE. kJADE released her sophomore effort on Everything I Love in February as a follow-up to her debut, The Sound That Trees Make. Although she veers in a more electronic and laid-back direction on her second record, her voice and her sound still carry the same poignancy, and she joins us today to discuss 5 records, ranging from the gospel and R&B of her childhood to the hip-hop that inspires her today. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Okay, thank you for joining me for today for our new episode of The Spin. I want to start by asking, your new album came out in February, just a couple months ago. What has it been like
hmm
in the wake of the release? What have you been up to since then? Are you working on anything? You don't have to get super specific here, but I'm just curious how life has been recently.
Yeah, yeah. So ever since the release of my project, yeah, it was 21st. It came out on Bandcamp only, and then we released it on DSPs everywhere else. About I want to say like a few weeks later. Um, and that was really beautiful because we brought that in with a listening party, really intimate session with some people who worked on the project and also just a lot of like loved ones who I, trust and appreciate their creative vision. It was a lot of wholesome support that I was receiving, the day that it was released. And I feel like ever since then, like it's kind of just been like climbing up the walls of, things that I never even expected, places and, like that I never kind of expected to hit. But that's just kind of with every project that I think any artist could ever release ever. There's always an effect you don't always expect. But it's been beautiful. It's been like really riveting, honestly, to be able to see how it takes form. So yeah.
Yeah. And are you working on anything currently that you can share? It's okay if you can't share it, but just out of
Oh no, yeah,
curiosity.
no, yeah, yeah. I feel like I'm always working on something. Like it's just kind of like I'm chronically always working on music, but yeah, I have a tape coming out here soon that I'm really excited to share, probably in July, possibly.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
hmm
so today I have the 5 albums you shared with me beforehand in the 5 different categories. So I'll go through the categories real quick for our listeners, and then we'll go album by album. And I have just things I want to talk about with each one and kind of trace your musical journey through those. So we have the
hmm
first album you ever heard or remember hearing, the first album you
hmm
bought, the most
Yeah.
influential album on you when you started making music, and then we have
Yeah.
a classic album or just an album that's generally underappreciated, and then an album
Yeah.
that's come out in the last 5 years that you've loved. So I'll
hmm
say those albums so the audience knows as we go through, but we'll start with Get Lifted by John Legend, which is the
hmm
first album you remember hearing.
Yeah.
So just to start, kind of walk me through, like, do you have a specific memory of hearing this album or even a general memory of like where this album would have been played, who showed it to you? Just describe that as best you can.
Yes. Like I remember hearing John Legend first off, like everyone in my family was always listening to John Legend. Like it's Sunday and we're cleaning, or it's, like after school and my nana's cooking, or we're on our way to school, we're at a party, I'm at my auntie's house, like everywhere. I'm getting my hair braided, like everyone. I just feel like every black person was listening to John Legend in the early 2000s. Specifically, this era was just like really infectious and really, really powerful bridges between like, so many people were coming out of gospel and like really showing their chops in R&B. And I feel like a lot of people kind of wanted or like really, really seeking all of that like feel of what is soul and what is gospel, circa like the 90s, or just like how like fundamental it is, all the fundamentals in black like Baptist or Pentecostal music, and then having it exist in R&B. Like everybody was all over that. So yeah, I think it was my mom. I remember she always had these CD like sleeves, that you
Hmm.
used to flip through. um I remember always flipping through that, and I would put that like in a CD player and like riding in her Nissan and listening to that like OD. Like we were always listening to John Legend.
So what
Yeah.
what were your childhood experiences with music like in general? Because I know
Mhm.
you mentioned that your mom and your grandma were huge influences in just like your music taste and,
Mhm.
and your exposure to music. So just tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So My grandmother, she wasn't one to leave the house much. She was like always filling up the domain with music. She was always playing jazz. Honestly, trying to think of her playing much else is like I'm short on that, even though whenever someone would play something else, she was always very familiar. I just always remember her playing like endless amounts of jazz. And then my mom, she loved all different types of music. Like literally, she put me on the Alice in Chains. She put me on to Gwen Stefani. She put me on to B2K. All sorts of different R&B legends. I can go down a whole list, and I feel like that just kind of speaks to itself. But like she loved Mary J. Blige. She loved John Legend. Um, yeah, she just listened to so much music. And so we also, I feel like my family always kept up with the work that like my cousin was doing. My cousin was a producer, and he was working with a lot of like, big artists at the time. So anything that he was on, I just remember like my mom would buy a physical copy of it, and we'd go through like this credits of like the CD sleeve. And then we'd always look for his name, and I used to like highlight it and everything. And yeah, so like we were always listening to like a lot of commercial music because of that too, because he, would work with people like Usher. He was working with Jeezy a lot. And yeah, I remember, that like practice, that was really fun. So yeah.
Yeah. And at what age, or would you say there was an age where you kind of became conscious that you enjoyed listening to music, or was it just always there in your life?
It was always in my life. Like people are always playing music, always singing. My great grandfather was a minister of church in the Bay, and I feel like that's probably like like my first wedding, first funeral, like earliest memories of music, kind of just being around that. That has like a musical permanence that I feel like it was dissonant ever since my family moved. Like we were not at all active in the church. Like once you kind of had our own intermediate family life, but still I feel like that like search for musical community took up so much space. Like I was always around music, 3 years old, earliest memories, and then onward. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they were all pretty active music listeners and pretty like wide ranging music listeners. Do you see anything
Yeah.
in your listening habits, either like your taste specifically or just the way you listen to music, that's imprinted on you from them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like just the way that I'm always switching in between music styles and genres. Again, my mom literally would just like she'd pop one CD into her car while we're driving, and then she would take that out, and all of a sudden we're listening to like Nickelback. Like it could be literally anything. You go from like John Legend to Nickelback to whatever jazz CD she has in her car at the time. It could literally be anything. So yeah, I definitely find myself. I've always been doing that through making like I used to make like little mixtapes on SoundCloud and upload them. I took all of them down though because they were just so messy. But and then also just yeah, playlists and always like interchanging what music I listen to. So yeah.
Yeah. And then, so can you, this is kind of a good segue to our next record, which I'll say out loud in a second, but first, can you just walk us through kind of the formation of your own personal music taste when you kind of started to discover music that you liked outside of,
Hmm.
not necessarily outside of what your parents were listening to, but just music that you would call your own?
Yes, yes. So like I gotta shout out YouTube, like obviously, like duh, like YouTube is literally the most fundamental listening music source that I think even beyond streaming platforms and like a lot of these DSPs. Of course, there's like YouTube Music that has its own streaming platform, but like it's just like that is literally where all the people post their music videos and their demos, samples, like so much, like just all the uncut gems are there, So I was there listening to all sorts of like Neptune's demos. Um, I feel like my love for bands like Mild High Club and like Home Shake really grew there. All sorts of like honestly what I was considering at the time bedroom pop is like definitely prominent there and on SoundCloud like overly. And also listening to I was at the time listening to, they went under a name Scallops Hotel. I was listening to them. Um, and then also I just remember like watching every Lil B video that I possibly could. Um, lots of Black Cray, honestly. Lots of Booty Chain. Like it was just like I was like always like kind of skimming whatever was considered underground at the time. I'm thinking like this is like circa like 2015, 2014, where I'm kind of just like scrubbing YouTube for music. Started like building massive playlists with like hundreds and hundreds of songs on them. So yeah, that's kind of like how I ended up forming that. YouTube is like my saving grace for this.
Yeah. Well, I might have taken us out of the chronology a little bit, but you listed "Tasty" by Kelis as first album you ever bought, right? So is
Yes.
that before all of this, like before the YouTube stuff, before the SoundCloud stuff? How old were you? And just tell me about the memory of purchasing that album as best you can.
I was probably like what, like 12, 13 at this time, and this is right around the same time.
Okay.
So we would, my love for music kind of went to, so like I would listen to music all day, every day, literally skipping school and being late to school just to like listen to music late at night or early in the morning or all day. And me and my siblings, we would go to a record store, and we would buy some stuff sometimes, but sometimes I would literally just like take pictures of things like all the vinyls and the CDs, and I'd like search it up at home because I didn't have the money to buy it. But when I did start having the money to buy things, I think the first thing that I said is I was listening to a lot of Neptune's demos, right?
Hmm.
I love the Neptunes, I always have. And I mean, kind of like who doesn't? Even if you aren't like really, really privy to everything, all the silhouette of what they've provided for so much in pop music and rap, everyone's kind of trying to emulate them in a way, you know? Like you can kind of tell like the structure of how they make their beats. And yeah, I was really enamored with the work that Shay and Chad and Pharrell were doing, and just Virginia as a whole. And yeah, Tasty by Kelis was kind of like a given. I had her poster up on my wall. Like when you unfold the CD sleeve, it has like this really sick poster of her. I thought the branding of the rollout for that album was phenomenal. I love all the videos. I love all the sounds that they were using. I love, love, love Raphael Sadiq, um, who did a lot of production work on there, who made one of my favorite demos ever. This is like, I don't say this ever because I gatekeep it, but I am gonna put this here for the ones who are like really, really like true to this. My favorite Kelis demo ever. She did this song that's from the Tasty era. This is like why I had to buy this because it's like an extension of it. It's called Harlem Streets, and Raphael Sadiq produced it. It's literally the craziest, like it just like really the bass in it slaps so hard. It's a really, really deep cut, and it just feels like a more intimate side of that album. Like you can see where it could have went, but they kept it really bright. They kept it colorful. They kept it fun. But it was just like, yeah, it was a really deep and sensual side of that project. So yeah, that's kind of like the world of all of my YouTube scavenging when it came to life, and I was like, I gotta buy this.
And do you think that like you're hunting for demos at that time and your YouTube scavenging, like did that deepen your appreciation for the actual released music you were listening to? Because that I feel like that was a good example there of that specific Khalees demo.
Absolutely. Like if I love something enough where it's like I'm listening to all these demos endlessly, just like I also do this all the time. I did this I just saw Username. I went to his show, and I mean I listened to his music like online, and I've been listening to it for a little bit, and I was like, okay, like it's time for me to buy a CD now, you know what I mean? So I can like get a physical copy. I think that's always gonna be like if I just love something enough, I really want to be able to like go out there and like take a little piece of it so I can kind of just like engage with it away from my phone or away from whatever, Like I just kind of want to have it for myself. So yeah,
Yeah. And then
definitely.
if you remember at all, what else was in your CD collection at that time after you got the
Oh my
Khalees
gosh.
record?
After Kelis, I remember this was around the time I bought Goblin by Tyler the Creator on CD. What else did I buy? Oh my gosh. I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside by Earl Sweatshirt. Um, what else did I buy on CD? Oh my gosh, this is such a fun time. I don't think I bought this like a physical copy, but I think I bought a digital copy of SZA's Z. I also bought her mixtape S, which I love them both so much. Like SZA was a huge, like she was like in the center of my context cloud of songs that I would listen to, or songs artists that I would listen to around the time. So yeah, those are some of the things that I was buying at the time too.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds like you were listening to hip hop from an early age, but I'm curious if there was any point
Hmm.
where that kind of became your predominant genre, would you say, or
Hmm.
was it always kind of a mix? Because it sounds like it might be around this time, but I'm curious from your perspective.
Hmm. I feel like just because of my community and like how I think it was like early, it was really a mix. And then I think the culture of hip hop has always been so, it gets very political, which can be very enticing because there's so many identities that were being woven into it that were kind of considered to be fresh, but are very constant actually. Um, and I threw myself into it so much that, yeah, I think there was a time where like hip hop became like a really dominant genre that I was listening to and just involving myself in generally. But like the music listening is always kind of a mix. I think I just started like letting the culture of hip hop that I'm living was always the constant. And then listening to hip hop music, like I can go hours, I could low key not listen to anything else for the day. Like that's a new development, but still I low key gotta listen to everything. Like I hope that answers the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it does. It does. And so, I mean, that gives me a good enough segue to go to our next album, and that's
Hmm.
Songs of Sage Post Panic by Navy Blue. You said was the most influential album on you when you started making
Yeah.
music. So just talk to me a little bit more about how your taste, particularly in hip hop, formed. Because you mentioned Earl Sweatshirt, you mentioned
Hmm.
Tyler the Creator, right? Like, just
Hmm.
walk me
Yeah.
through that journey.
So this is so fun because I think really like thinking of how it all really started bubbling for me listening to all these different cuts of music, like where hip hop was going even at the time on what was known to be a commercial level, like if you blinked, you would miss the next act. Like there was just so many different identities, you know what I mean, like being rolled out.
Hmm.
And I mean like when I see someone like all of the likes of TDE coming out. I think that's kind of when I was really walking into like this sphere of what people were considering like an alternative hip hop or like a different tier of it when we're kind of it wasn't underground because they were still like signed and still commercial, or maybe that is considerable, but like still it's just it was still like on the up and up of what is commercial, you know what I mean? Also that intertwined with all of like the YouTube scrubbing I was doing, where I'm listening to people like I'm going from Earl to Damo Genesis to then now I'm listening to Scallops Hotel. And I'm like listening to all these beat tapes. I'm just listening to Clams Casino. I'm just listening to all these different people. It built a world of like hip hop to where it started getting me deeper and deeper into what was considered now underground, and a lot of independent people just making music because for the love of the game. Absolutely also intertwined with me at the same time, just like so happened to also be getting myself involved in like internet communities where like what was considered the Instagram spam community, people were just kind of like loosely posting all the time about anything every day, and that also meant music. And I also just saw people who were making music independently and posting it on SoundCloud, which so my friends who were making music, I'm like listening to everything they got going on along with that. It just built like a huge, like rap and hip hop anchor in my musicality, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you kind of already answered this, but it's in my list of questions, so I'll ask it again to see if there's
Hmm.
any extra like context to be given. But it seems like when you started forming your own music taste through SoundCloud and through YouTube, you gravitated pretty immediately to what would be known as the underground stuff or the lo-fi stuff
Hmm.
or what was there at the time. Do you think that's true? Like you gravitated immediately towards that, or was that more the final destination on a longer journey for you?
Hmm. I do think I immediately gravitated towards it, but what's like ironic too is how I mentioned like I had a cousin who was working in the industry and doing a lot of commercial work. And I thought this was just like it's just hip hop, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't have explained it as commercial. I'm just like this is kind of just like what hip hop is, you know what I mean? Because my idea of it was like sometimes it was also, like I have like brothers who make music. I have, like cousins who make music too, you know what I mean? Like people just like you go to school with somebody and like their brother raps too. Like that's also kind of a thing. But it was more so along the lines of like the way that I saw that I didn't see what these people were doing as anything different than what my cousin was doing, even though it was like we pop your bottles and we are like completely out the hood. Like it was not even like a thing in my mind. Like something about all of this was just like the taste for music. It was literally just music, and I didn't like acknowledge so much of the separatism. I was just enamored by it all. Then I started understanding like, how rigid the game can be, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean just this but going underground, I didn't even feel like it was underground until I realized like how personal it was. Like, you start to understand the categories and the way which ways the doors really swing and the industry. So yeah, but I do think I gravitated towards it. I just didn't even realize it.
Yeah. And so at what point did you discover Navy Blue? And if you don't have to, if you remember exactly where you discovered him, that's great. But just
Hmm.
talk me through that story. What appealed to you immediately about this project? Was it the first project of his you discovered?
Hmm. So Navy Blue is like I had internet mutuals in New York that were like skaters, you know what I mean? And I just kind of like watched them do their thing. And that's when Navy Blue, like before Navy Blue was the rapper, like that was who he only went by Sage is what I understood.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like Sage started rapping and then undertook the moniker like Navy Blue. So that I don't remember exactly. I'll say this. When I'm saying like when I first started making music, that low key is like such a long drawn out journey to me where like depending on what pieces trail in, I like to start the story around this was I want to say 2018, 2019.
Okay.
This is when it really started because Post Panic came out in 2019 or 2020. And I just like to start it there because that's when I was really taking everything seriously. Of course I was writing and rapping and performing, but like that's when it was just like, oh, I'm like really making music. I have my identity now. And if you listen to anything that I'm making around that time, like I really feel like you can connect it to a lot of what Navy Blue was doing, quite honestly. Yeah, so this was around like 2019. Yeah.
Nice. And so what appealed to you about Navy Blue and that project originally?
So such an easy listen, such an easy vocal performance. But I never wanted to listen passively once. Like the first time I started like releasing my music and telling people they can listen to it, I was like, you can listen to it passively if you want to. But what I personally feel, even when I listen to things that are like easy on the ear and it makes me want to listen to what's more provoking about the details of it that makes someone even want to rap over something like that's really lush. I mean, there's some hard-handed shit on there, absolutely too. But yeah, like it was just also the cover was so powerful
Mhm.
that it really did draw me into like a really beautifully hand-drawn portrait, and it ties the project in together so well, like really. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's zoom out a little bit before we get too much farther, and go. I guess
Hmm.
even before you discovered this project, like, tell me about when you decided you wanted to start making music yourself before you were necessarily serious about it.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
just tell me about that process and kind of how we get to the point where you are serious about it and you're discovering artists like Navy Blue that are informing your sound at this time.
Yeah. So when I really, really started, I always tell people about how like when I was a kid, I was really shy and I had to like carry a notebook around with me and like write things on a piece of paper and hand it to people because I just like could not speak. And what was funny is because like when I was around other kids, like I was not shy at all. Like I was actually very much like a class clown, but just when I had to be vulnerable, so I started writing and writing and writing. I wrote stories. I started drawing a lot, creating characters, and then eventually that just transformed into me writing music all the time alongside my love for it, naturally. And then it was just habitual. Like all my thoughts just translate best on paper. I felt powerful listening to music. I started writing to music. And it just naturally kind of came together like from the age of, I want to say, like as early as 10. I remember writing songs. In 11, I still have all my notebooks with all the earlier songs that I wrote. And sometimes because I like to like do a thing every weekend and put on like a mask or something and like go through my journals and see what my younger self was saying, or even from last year, like I have bars that were like informed based on some things that I would say when I was a kid that
Mhm.
like still enter my songs. And it's pretty interesting. So yeah, I want to say around like really like absolutely like 10, 11 years old. So like really writing.
Yeah. And so by the time you got to the point where you were taking it more seriously, what would you say specifically you took away from Navy Blue, from Songs of Sage, and just from similar artists as far as who you wanted to be as an artist and maybe your
Hmm.
songwriting and how you wanted to approach your craft?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this Navy Blue introduced me to Ka, and those are like two artists that I always kind of mentioned too. Where it's just like the way that they approached structuring a song. It kind of just like insists upon itself. You know what I mean? Like when I write, I feel like I can literally stack my thoughts and experiences like upon itself because it kind of just reveals itself. You know what I mean? And that's the way that they kind of rap, which I just felt so inspired by. And all of like the power that they had that was coming from their music, like when they were rapping, was not forceful by how they would project their voice. It was so internal and conscious that I felt very seen by that. Like if I had to like find any way to like get my way out of a situation, I probably wouldn't use as much physical strength as I would use, my words and my mind.
Hmm.
And I feel like, you know, they just really embody that really well in their music. So those are some notes I would take away from someone like Navy Blue, someone like Ka. So yeah.
Yeah. And so as you were kind of like honing your songwriting abilities, right, and approaching um, work on your first record or at least your first album on DSPs, right?
Hmm.
Do you think that that's something that you I'm trying to figure out how to formulate this, but I guess do you feel like that's something that you improved at pretty rapidly, or was it a slower, drawn out process? Is being
Mm.
able to kind of not mirror but reflect what you were saying about those artists.
I think I like the way that I approach. The first time I really released a project, The Sound the Trees Make, I think that it kind of just came together really well based on how I was informed by other artists and what they were doing at the time. And not even just like someone like Navy Blue. Like I was also listening to like Nalisa Nefro, a jazz musician, a composer who, the way that they formatted things, I was really inspired by. Fly Anakin I was listening to.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, just around those times, like all of these things kind of informed the way that I would structure a project. Based on how I did that the first time, I think that was enough identity for me. Like the way I was um, translating what they did through myself. I now use that blueprint, and then I did it similarly on everything I love. And this next project, I'm using that version of what I informed from my first projects for my next release. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just like kind of just like a Russian doll of how I encapsulate it. Yeah, that's kind of how I'm doing it. So.
Yeah. And then I want to ask about your just your beat selection, your like choice of instrumentals, right? And
Hmm.
I want to talk about I guess I want to talk about the sound that trees make and then your new project separately because I have some questions about your new project
Hmm.
for the fifth album we'll talk about. But so you
Hmm.
worked with the producer Esteban on the sound that trees make, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes. Yes.
How do you feel like they influenced I guess just the final way that that project turned out? How do you feel like they influenced your creative process and your kind of and just the overall sound that you were going for on the record?
Yeah. So around that time, I was like formally working with like a group of people where we had a lot of different identities and they clashed, and it doesn't it, the in the midst of that, it may not be, um if you are not actively like clashing or conflicting with someone, I realize it's not a good place to try and know yourself. If you're fighting though, you do know yourself, you know what you're fighting for, so that's cool. But if you're not the fighter, like it's just kind of weird. So I took a step back, and I was just going through a big period of loss, and I was just really close to Esteban at the time, and he has this type of um he has like an air to him of like he's very receptive. He's very like welcoming. He's not judgmental, you know what I mean? So around that time, I just kind of like I was softening around him,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of me, that was like softening, and that's when I really began to really understand myself and like provide clarity and gather every experience that I had. And his sound, even when he's producing, kind of he's very meticulous, but he does not make things difficult when he works at all. Like he likes to work quickly, very swiftly, and that therefore like there's a lot of clearance, there's a lot of ease like in the process where we're kind of just like we silently communicate with each other with a lot of body language, you know what I mean, and a lot of passive elements in his beat making kind of let me step forward and do a lot of more structural things, like how I rap percussively, just providing a bit of structure to things, like the way that we kind of come together. So yeah, that's kind of just how he influences me, just kind of like affirms kind of what I already do naturally. And yeah, also our taste, like we give each other so much game on music all the time. Like we really do inspire each other's taste, I think, so constantly. So yeah, that's how that happened with Trees.
Yeah. And I'm also curious to know, how do you know, to the best extent you can describe it, how do you know when an instrumental will kind of fit into your range and what you're going for? Because
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the passivity was one thing with Esteban and like that being latent in
Mm-hmm.
his beats, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, when I hear a instrumental and I feel really swayed by it, it usually is because of the space it does have or it doesn't have. Like, if it has space and I feel like I can fill that perfectly, I'd like it. Or if it is really compact and there's like maybe it's highly compressed, but um I can add structure to it. I can create space in it. You know what I mean? I like that as well. And sometimes, these are things that have a certain swing to them, and I'm like, that's great. I like the way that feels. Or just like, like the certain sounds that I'm hearing. It's kind of getting weirder for me because the more that I've covered, the more I'm like looking to venture into new things. Like I feel like my sounds are getting more broad.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I lied actually. I do have one question about your second record right now. And it's just,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as you started to work on it, did you have a way you wanted to approach the sound differently at all, or just is there any way you wanted
Mm-hmm.
to approach it differently in a more general sense?
Yeah. No, there were some things that I did want to kind of reconstruct and reconfigure. For instance, I needed it to feel more lighthearted. It felt more accurate and true to where I was at the time.
Hmm.
I just wanted things to be more bright. Trees was pretty heavy, it was dense, and that was accurate for the time. But for this, I really wanted it to be just like fast moving in a way. And I wanted people to know that, like there's kind of a bit of a like some triumph in there, so um yeah, there was definitely some things that I changed, but when it came to like finding space and picking it, I knew I just like there were certain sounds like that I really wanted to step into. Low key, like I'll rap on a lot of soul loops, but I didn't want to tire myself out of that. So I wanted to go with, like we have like some footwork inspired things. There are still some soulful things on there, of course. Like that's just kind of true to, walking away from something like Trees, and something into like what's coming after on Everything I Love. So yeah.
Nice. Well, I don't have a convenient segue here or a convenient shift, but I'm going to go to the fourth record you mentioned, which was
Okay.
just an underappreciated album generally, and you said "Traveling Light" by Money for Water. I want to ask first because Money for Water was one of the first interviews we did for Melt FM, and you were one of the first interviews we did for Melt FM.
Swear. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So do you know him personally, or have you worked with him in any way, or is this kind of like a more of an internet connection?
So we've met before when I was in Charlotte. Um, I did a show with my friend June and Jay Cinema and Reiki Apollo and Noon, and Money for Water was also on the bill. And that was just a really great time when I was out in Charlotte. We met there, but it was like rather brief. I think we've been like so much more consistent just via the internet. And I've been listening to like I took it upon myself to listen to everyone's work before I like did the show, and I think I was already
Hmm.
just a little bit familiar through features of other friends and artists. But yeah, I was really fucking with what he had going on, and I remember I was able to exchange with him there. But after the fact of that show, that's when I really started like sinking into more of his discography, and I was like, "Oh, this is tough." So we have like lapped before and kind of sent each other. I don't know if I've sent him something just yet, even though I do have it in mind. And he sent me something. So yeah, that's in the works.
Nice, nice. Well, if you
Yeah.
could just tell me more specifically what you love about Traveling Light and what you love about Money for Water sound.
Yeah. Yeah. So Traveling Lights, like 45 minutes, 18 tracks. That time to like track ratio, I really appreciate because that means you're walking through many doors of like a whole different experience, but it's just broken into so many different like axes, if you will. Like you can kind of it feels like something where you kind of could like pick up on a different track and be introduced to like maybe you are deeper in the story because it feels like it progressively gets a little bit more um like you need more context of the earlier tracks almost sometimes. I don't think it's directly linear though, but it just feels like you really kind of like you're really going through a storyline. But I personally, what I would like about it the most is I think the writing was just so like it really feels like he's trying to break out of something. You know what I mean? He's finding like all these different tools to tinker his way out of different things that I've found myself in different, situations before where the way that he's using his words, it feels like in so many different ways he's putting up a fight. Like a really restless spirit is like in these songs. And I just found that alluring. So yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Hmm.
so this is kind of another sharp transition. We're not going to the fifth record yet, but I wanted to ask you because I feel like it
Hmm.
relates slightly and it's something I've been thinking about a lot actually is so JPEG Mafia,
Mm,
he's doing the like press tour right now for his what
right.
is experimental rap and he's said a
Hmm.
lot of things about like Earl Sweatshirt and all of these underground rappers and
Uh-huh.
what he thinks separates him from them. And I try not to pay too much
Hmm.
attention to it because it's just press, right? But it
Yeah.
feels to underground rap for a long time, even as far back as you were talking about when you were first buying CDs, has operated in like that experimental sense. So I want to
Hmm.
ask if
Hmm.
you agree with that and what direction you think underground rap, insofar as you can describe it
Hmm.
as like one thing and one wave, which it's not, what direction do you think it's
Hmm.
moving in, if there is one?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we have to consider I will use the word experimental, but I will start by saying niggas were never calling ourselves experimental rappers. Like that was kind of a result of like I think it is literally Spotify Anglo-Saxon jargon that was like, you know how Spotify does this thing where it has like a random AI generated playlist name that it'll give you, where it's
Yeah.
like football Sunday jazz genre. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what the fuck does that mean? That's kind of like what experimental rap sounds like to me because it was like, well, you're a rapper. This is hip hop. It's regional. You might have different slang to associate yourself on what you're doing. Like some people call it spitting. Some people, call themselves an MC. Like this is a cipher. Like, depending on what era. But contextually, no one was just calling themselves experimental because that insists that not like there's only one sector of rap that is experimental, but to rap was always resistance, it was always experimental, it was always a test of character, it was always a display of creativity from like where we were coming from, where it's like there's like dance hall and there's like people coming from jazz backgrounds where people are scatting, there's soul music and funk and rock, and now we're taking all of that and we're literally just reciting our experiences over it. You know what I mean? That was as experimental as it got. You know what I mean? Like from the very beginning. So the only way through this entire thing is to keep turning knobs to see where we haven't touched before, like where we haven't been, like where in these shadows have we not unveiled something. That's the only, like, we are only unveiling like corners of like places where people have never been before. Like people, like, okay, I don't, there's so many reasons why you could fuck with someone like Dochi, truly, but the biggest standout to me is that she is a black, dark skinned girl from Tampa, Florida, and a lesbian. We've never had these things before. That's
Hmm.
like one of the biggest championing points of someone like that. You know what I mean? Like we have a lot of trans artists who are doing their thing where it's not that, they black genderqueer women didn't build the genre, more so that to champion these places where we haven't seen successors in these like intersectionalities before. These are the biggest things to offer. It's experimental as at at large, to where we have people who are just like prophetic and savant like rappers who it's like you hit every pocket. We've seen like the TJX6s of the world. We've seen the Visas of the world, the Luckies, the um we could even get into, the KRS ones. We getting into the Ladybug Meccas of the world. Like people were just like incredibly talented with it, right?
Hmm.
And they've covered so much and inspired so many people. But now it's like, how do you do that with your identity too? And how does that inspire you to find a new pocket? Like, I mean, and it's not even just restrictive to people like in their intersectionality, in their identity, but like, and like subsequently that will make you rap in a way that's never been done before. It'll make you say things that people've never heard, like cultural references that have never been seen before. It's always a new experiment being unveiled. So yeah, the freakier you get, the more I think we're actually going to support you. We're taking our power back and going underground. I think as a whole, like we're really like rap is too conscious, even when it's not too, like we're very conscious of our ownership. You know what I mean? So we're always trying to go back underground and be in control of what we have going on. So people are ready to, like we're really ready to stand the line for when it comes to people like, streaming platforms, DSPs, deplatforming and all of that. Like we're really just kind of ready to find different ways to take our power back too, which is a result of, that intersectionality I'm kind of referencing. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And
that's what I'm noticing.
I feel like it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, kind of the lack of conscious divide you drew when you were first getting into music between underground rap
Hmm.
and commercial rap, right? Because it is
Hmm.
all, like you said, hit experimenting in some way and turning those knobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, because like at first I'm like, music, yay. You know what I mean? And then I'm like really starting to just get myself familiar. Like Kanye West is not someone like at the time was not Mavi. You know what I mean? Like Mavi was my friend on the internet, and that's someone who raps, and I'm, like my friend from Broward, Florida, you know what I mean, who's doing their thing. That is like not someone, like they're not at that point when I was exploring them, they're not the same. And then you start understanding regions and dialects and yeah, everything.
Yeah. Nice. Well, we have
Yeah.
we have one more album to talk about. Your last one is Fan Letter by, is it, I should have asked this before we started recording, to be honest, but is it Mikey FM or MKYFM?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
Mikey FM.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, but I didn't want to just. I guess I could have just said it. I would have been right anyway. But just tell me,
Mhm.
because this is different than a lot of the sounds that you have on this list, but it's not all that different from some of the sounds you have on your new record, right? So
Mhm.
tell me about what you love about this album, and as a follow up question, do you think it influenced your work on your second record in any way, and kind of the instrumentals you were seeking out and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just the way that I kind of relate to a lot of the use of those sounds in general. Well, I'll talk about what I love about it first. Like
Yeah.
the drum and bass music, where it's just like the sounds that were being used are drum and bass, but sometimes you kind of build like a very standard hip hop beat with a lot of different, like if you took apart like a house song, but you took all of those songs, like those individual sounds, and you built like a jerk beat. That's kind of like what a lot of these sounds sound like to me.
Hmm.
And like how these songs kind of reveal themselves. and it feel just I mean that's kind of what drum and bass can be. It's very broad in general how you can like really take shape of that. But yeah, I definitely was sourcing a lot of like just like the feeling of like a lot of how airy it can be, but like a lot of these drums are very grounding in it. It's always kind of how I've been, but less revolved around soul and really just more revolving around like uh like again just that pocket of like taking you can deconstruct one song and build a whole new one with these sounds. So yeah, that's what I really liked.
Yeah, yeah, and then I think this
Hmm.
will be my last question, but you mentioned on whatever you've got coming next, you're working on
Hmm.
taking the sound somewhere else, right? But also tracing back to some of the stuff you did
Hmm.
on the first record and some of the stuff you did
Hmm.
on the second record. So again,
Hmm.
I don't want to press you for too many details because I know some of it's probably nebulous, some of it's under wraps. But just tell me
Hmm.
about like where you envision your sound generally going next.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the concept of being able to just kind of like keep forwarding my momentum and exploring music just because I love it so much. I want to find new ways to offer myself to it. And that does mean like, a lot of new ways where I'm kind of like regenerating my approach to the sounds that I involve myself in and the ways that I rap. Also just the ways that I'm being changed by life. It just kind of happens naturally. But yeah, I mean, a lot of a lot of the sound that is consistent, like let's say from the first project, it's definitely by the structure, the way that I'm rapping. I think that I'm always pretty consistent on that, like the way that I rap. Um, but also just kind of like maybe tipping it a little bit to a darker side. Again, some of these things are just a bit lush and a bit soft, but intentional, which is like very consistent through a lot of my music. But I am kind of like also having a lot more fun. There's still some lighthearted things where I'm starting to like really represent new feelings on the feelings wheel, the emotions wheel. You know what I mean? Like, and that's actually been a huge inspiration for me is literally looking at a feelings wheel and being like that's how I feel today, and that word sticks with me and I end up bringing it into my music. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm taking the approach for this next project.
Thank you again for tapping into this episode of The Spin. If you enjoyed this episode and this conversation, please check out our website at melt-fm.com to see some of our interviews with rising artists from across the globe and some of the additional content we'll be pushing out over the coming months. Thank you.